Our theme for predictions this year is harnessing energy. And one of the themes that you're going to be hearing throughout this morning is the way in which it can be harnessed for good and also for bad. So, there are now enormous opportunities, there's enormous potential for us to harness this energy and make decisions and take actions which deliver positive outcomes for our customers, for our businesses, and also for our societies. Unfortunately, though, there are choices that we can make and actions that we can take which harness this energy in a way which has negative consequences for our customers, for our business, and for the societies that we are supposed to be serving. And this is a new take, I think, on transformation, on technology. We've been hearing more about this around the world, and it is a key thread that will weave throughout our predictions this year. So we'll be sharing this with you, and you'll be hearing from our analysts across a number of different coverage areas. We'll be sharing our predictions for customer experience. My colleague Tom Mushian will be sharing what our predictions are for CX. We'll then move on to Xiaofeng Wang. Xiaofeng will be sharing our predictions from a B2C marketing perspective. We'll then move on to Paul Dolan, who will be talking about B2B marketing and what we see coming in 2020. Frédéric Geron. Fred is a VP and Research Director here in Singapore. He'll be looking at the CIO implications. And then finally, my colleague Akim Granzen, he's going to be looking at the emerging technology perspective, looking at things like AI, automation, IoT, edge computing, and what our predictions are in each of these areas. So, with that background, let me talk a little bit, before we move to 2020, let me remind you of what we talked about in 2019 with our predictions about this time a year ago. What we said was that 2019 was going to be a year of pragmatism. And our overarching theme was that transformation goes pragmatic. And the reason we selected this theme is because we found that many organizations were struggling to meet the expectations for their digital transformations. Many had launched very ambitious, grandiose types of initiatives, but they did not meet the expectations. In fact, they weren't even clear what they were doing. It was very, very difficult for most of them to measure the success. And as a result, what many organizations did, in fact most, was they reoriented their transformations toward more pragmatic focus points that they could quickly measure. They could determine what progress they were making, and in many cases they moved this more toward the back office, as opposed to the digital customer experiences in the front end that they had focused on largely before then. They shifted that focus over more to the back office, and this prediction we think has held up relatively well. It was indeed a year of pragmatism. As I said earlier, our belief is that this year that's to come, 2020, is the year to harness energy. And there are three types of energy that we think are most important as you think about the coming year. The first is customer energy, as customers and employees become more values-based. What we see happening, and I suspect you've been seeing more of this as well, is that our customers and our employees are increasingly asking us to take a stand on social issues. They increasingly care about what our values are as a provider. What do we stand for? Where is our position? What are our values? And this is a dynamic that we think is only going to pick up pace, not just in 2020, but beyond. This is becoming a far more important focus point, we think, for all organizations. We'll talk more about that today. The second is security energy. So we're seeing industrial and nation-state cyber risks surge, and in some states merge. So the threats to our organizations from a cybersecurity perspective are also climbing, which brings new requirements and also new areas that we need to invest and decisions we need to make. And then finally, technology energy. And a key thrust here, we believe, is automation, AI, and robotics, which are going to move deeper into the organization, deeper into our operations. They are going to change the way that we work, what we expect employees to do, and they're going to move much closer to customers. And as organizations, we need to figure out how we manage that from an organizational perspective, and also how we harness this energy to benefit our clients. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this customer energy point. And there was an interesting article in Fortune, and there's an organization or a group called the Business Roundtable. And there are a lot of leading enterprises from around the world, the biggest ones in the world, like IBM, JP Morgan, and Johnson & Johnson. And they got together and they talked about the purpose of an enterprise, of a business. What is the purpose of a business? And what they said is that the primary purpose is to meet the needs of our stakeholders. So this means our customers, our employees, and the communities within which we operate. They said that is our top priority. Now, an interesting thing happened because the Council of Institutional Investors, which is usually a partner of theirs, spoke up and released a statement and said that they disagree. They didn't like this idea because the Council of Institutional Investors said the key objectives of a business is to meet the needs of the investors. Now, what the Business Roundtable said was that investors are providers of capital. What the Council of Institutional Investors said was, we are the owners. So your objective and your reason for being is to serve us and to make us more money. And in fact, this is what has fueled a lot of our companies and capitalism for a long time. But what the Business Roundtable has noticed is that this doesn't cut it anymore. I think all of us in this room, correct me if I'm wrong, but I suspect when you hear that, it makes you feel a little bit sick. For the wealthiest to say, we must serve you, we must make you more money, especially when you consider the wealth gap that is emerging around the world, which is a very interesting dynamic. Now, what I'm going to say, I'm not going to ask you to put your values on the table, but what I will say, and what Forrester is saying, is that this is not just something that we do because it's altruistic, it's good business. So as companies, if we want to be successful, we need to put our customers' interests and our employees' interests first. You can put the morality of it aside, and what we're going to tell you today is if you do not do that, it is bad for business. And in fact, the title of this article, I would suggest, is a false choice because they're not mutually exclusive. By doing right by your customers, you're actually doing right by your business. Now, if you're a digital native, the challenge here is even greater. This is a quote from Lee Rainey at the Pew Research Center, and this has also been in the news, right? Digital natives and how they use information, the information that they disseminate and distribute, and the business models that they employ. What the Pew Research Center says is there's considerable concern that the way people use the internet is degrading trust. The fate of trust and truth is up for grabs. And of course, the inference here is not just the customer or the consumer, but in fact, the organizations and the businesses and the way in which they use the internet to drive their businesses. So this is going to become a much more important thread and theme of our businesses, and we're going to talk more about it today to show you the full gamut of what types of choices we need to make as leading businesses to succeed and to meet this call. Now, every year at this time, Forrester comes out with dozens of global predictions. And at events like this, we have to pick a handful that we think are most important to our customers in the markets that we serve. So here in Singapore and Asia Pacific, we'll be talking about the ones that we think are most important for all of you. However, we did want to share with you 4 other ones that we think are important that we can't necessarily talk about in detail today, but we thought it was useful for you to know. The first is that we're predicting that data strategy will unlock transformations. So that transformational stall that I referenced earlier, what we're seeing is that leading organizations are increasingly investing in data as the key that unlocks that stall. And the advanced firms, we think, will double or triple their spending on data strategy to climb past their competition. We're also expecting that 40% of organizations will invest in data literacy programs for all of the employees in their organization to create a data tide that lifts all boats. A second one is that privacy concerns will gain steam. So customers are becoming much more aware and concerned about how their data is being collected and how it's being used. As an organization, you can expect this to climb. And there is now a push where customers are becoming more active and proactive in feeding an anti-surveillance economy. So if you have a business model which is dependent on privacy policies which are less strict, this could become a bigger challenge for you. Similarly, we think regulators will get in on the game, and we're expecting them to change many of these dynamics, and we think this will have a big impact on the marketing ecosystem environment, primarily in the area of third-party data and ad tech. So what we're expecting to see more regulators do is require that this data be anonymized and aggregated. And as they do that, the way in which we leverage digital advertising, what we've come to know about it, is going to be upended. And then from a B2B perspective, we're expecting more enterprises to opt out of data sharing agreements that feed AI. In fact, we think 20% of enterprises will opt out of those types of models. And then finally, the fourth here is that we think for VCs, profitability will become the new unicorn. All right, so you would have seen this year, many of the companies, the unicorns that went public, they didn't get the valuations that they were expecting. The path to profitability is really being questioned. We've seen just recently with the We company that it's been completely revamped. And there are a lot more questions now about these valuations, and there's more of a drive toward profitability. So these are four that we wanted to share with you that we won't talk about in too much depth, but we thought it was important for you to know.